Please welcome back Martín Rejtman. So I'll start out by asking a few questions, and then we'll bring the audience in. Almost every time I do one of these Q&As, the first question is always, could you tell us what inspired the film? So that's the question.
And with me, it's a tricky question because there are many, many things that inspired my films. It's not just one particular scene or situation. In this case, maybe the strongest scene in the film is the first sequence. I think I started, the script started taking the shape of what it is, the film now, after adding that scene to what I was writing. I write in a very unorganized way somehow, and it takes me a long time to put a story together because I don't have a story beforehand. The story comes, surfaces when I start putting all these pieces together and they start to make some sense. So I think the strongest, when film started to really have a form was when I thought of this.
So you're saying that essentially the way you kind of approach writing is that you don't sit down with an idea that you want to express.
Exactly.
It's more free associative. You're just kind of.
No, I just think of scenes and situations and characters, and one thing leads to the other. And but yeah, I never have a story in my head before I start writing. I never have an idea that I want to express. I think that comes later. It's like a second stage.
I mean, I think that approach kind of explains the kind of very unusual character of the film, that it's kind of very free form and kind of unpredictable. Certainly, in terms of its structure, extremely unpredictable. I wanted to ask you very specifically about that. The way the film begins, it suggests that it's going to really revolve around Mariano. And for a good period of time, it does seem to revolve around him, or around his particular constellation of relationships, his mother, but mostly young people. And then, at a certain moment, the film completely changes. It becomes about his mother and the vacation that she takes with his recorder teacher. And then we're suddenly into a completely different constellation of characters, and Mariano is completely forgotten. Also in the Mariano section of the film, periodically he's narrating. Initially he's narrating his own experiences, but then he starts to narrate other people's experiences that he couldn't have really known. And when we get to this second group of characters who are a different generation, different kind of, they have similarities, they're ordering pizzas, but they have different kinds of things that they want to talk about. But at the end of that, Mariano once again is kind of narrating what happened to them, which he couldn't have possibly known. And then finally, there's this wonderful coda with Susanna and the dog. The dog escapes at the beginning, and when you reintroduce the dog at the end, we feel sure that that's going to be the ending of the film, is that the dog will return and they'll be reunited. But no, that doesn't happen.
It's not that kind of narrative. I mean, that's clear. I mean, I wanted to introduce again the dog, and I wanted to somehow close the story of that house and that family. But that's not, I mean, it wouldn't be fair to finish the film like that, because that's not the film, that's not the kind of narrative that this film is. So.
But could you talk about the decision to kind of shift the film from focusing on one kind of group of people to another?
Yeah, usually, I mean, like the last third of the film, which is like the part of the movie when Susanna goes on vacation, for me it was like taking a vacation from the movie somehow, from the other characters, like getting, and also many times I have the feelings when I watch movies that I get kind of bored in the middle, and I want the story to change. So I thought that it was a good idea to start telling somehow a different story with the same characters. I have that feeling actually with many movies that in the middle is that everything's been told already, and there is something else that needs to be told.
One of the things that's really interesting about the film that kind of runs through all of the characters in both parts of the narrative, or both narratives, is that there's a consistent kind of lack of affect. People don't seem affected by anything that happens. The bird hits the window. The son. I mean, the mother clearly is disturbed by her son's apparent attempt to commit suicide because she's hiding the knives. But people aren't emotional. People are unaffected. They remain on an extremely kind of even keel.
Yeah, but you know, I think I get that question a lot, of course, and but I think it's more about what I choose to show of these characters than than the fact that these characters don't feel anything. I choose not to show the scenes where these characters would be crying or would be really doing extreme things. I prefer to show the other moments of their lives. So I think it's more I think that's the reason. It's not so much that nothing affects them, is that I don't show the moments where they are affected by things, probably. If those moments happen, I don't know, but I rather look at other things.
In a sense, your film shows us the moments that other movies leave out in a story, perhaps.
Maybe, could be. I don't know. I'm not sure about that, but yeah.
Another question I have for you is a very specific one, which is that although these are three-dimensional people, you're not really that interested in their psychology, and yet there are two scenes when they visit psychiatrists, and those two psychiatrists seem to be completely ineffective. And is that, in a way, your kind of comment on your own kind of approach to character?
I went to a psychologist when I was a kid, and I never spoke to this woman for a whole year. I didn't say a word in a whole year. I think that's why I have this scene with Susanna in the psychiatrist, and she's not talking, and you know she's going back to the desk at the end of the scene. But I'm not trying to comment on I really don't know because I was a kid when I went to the psychologist. So it's a whole culture in Argentina to go to a psychologist. But here they go to a psychiatrist, which is a little different. They have bigger issues. But it's true, it's completely ineffective. Mariano already did the test that the psychiatrist is suggesting, so he already knows that. And Susanna doesn't know how to behave there. I mean, she doesn't know. She goes to the couch, to the couch, but she doesn't lay down. She just sits there, and then he has to tell her what to do. So they don't know what to want. Mariano knows too much, and Susanna doesn't know enough, I think.
Lastly, before I turn it over to the audience, another very specific thing that seems to be almost like the unifying principle of the movie are the telephones, the kind of a tyranny of ringtones that all of the characters experience, and I'm interested in why that somehow becomes the thing that overlays everything.
It's not something that I thought about when I wrote the script, that there were going to be so many sounds of cell phones. I wrote cell phone, and I never imagined that it was going to be so noisy, actually. And it was like building a whole soundtrack out of different ringtones that some of them we fabricated, some of them we found online in archives. So yeah, I mean, at the end it became like a motif in the film, as the flutes, the recorder, the music for recorders is also another motif, and it's like more music in a way, you know, and also the way the characters talk is another kind of music in the movie. So I think the movie somehow is very musical. Sometimes the music is distorted. Sometimes, not many times, the music is harmonic because even when the music quartet plays, there is Mariano's flute that is not sounding right. So there's always some kind of problem with the music that's in the movie. Only at the end, in the end credits, you hear the music for the recorders without any distortion, and that's because it's the credits and the film is finished.
The film also, I mean, the very first image of the film is of somebody who is completely, I guess, engulfed in music.
Right, like in a trance somehow. And that's, I wanted to have a bridge between my last feature film, Los Guantes Mágicos, The Magic Gloves, which ends with the main character in a disco also, and I wanted to have like a bridge between the two movies somehow. Because I think that the beginning of this film is like an ending somehow.
Let's see if we have some questions out there in the audience. Anyone? Yes.
Can you tell us more about the character interplay? When you see characters interacting, do you see the whole sequence, or do you just see, okay, I want to see these two guys interacting, and I don't know what's going to happen? Tell us more about how you see the characters interplay.
But I don't understand the question. Can you explain it a little bit better, maybe?
It seems that you are very much interested in characters interplaying with each other, interacting with each other. But they seem to say one thing, and then they respond to that, and there's a surprise effect, and we cannot predict. There's no climax, there's no, and you go from one character to another, and that's the whole constant surprise, what deadpan delivery and all that. When you see, so is that, am I getting this right or not?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. But what's the question then?
So then tell us more about how you see characters interplay, because the entire film seems to be about that. I mean,
but I think you just answered the question somehow. I mean, it's like, what else can I tell you?
Okay.
It's like, you describe the system that more or less is the system that you see in the film.
But characters interplaying, that say, seeking the silence, seeking the nonsense, seeking the deadpan delivery, seeking surprise. You see what I mean? That it's much more interesting, I think, that...
Yeah, for me, characters are, and the lines that they say are part of a scene, and a scene is part of the whole film. And it's like I think of scenes as a complete thing, and I don't consider too much the psychology of the characters, but I rather have them interact and see what happens when one says one thing and the other one replies. I want to see the effect of that. It's not maybe a logical effect, but that's what keeps the movie going somehow. It's what keeps what makes the next scene appear, what they're saying, what they're doing. So that's the system I use to build a narration somehow, to build a story.
Would you say that the rehearsals of the recorder quartet are, in some sense, a comment or a counterpoint to the kind of dialogue and the kind of interactions that are being described? Those interactions always seem to kind of dead end very quickly, or they don't produce a dialogue. They tend to be an exchange that kind of quickly comes to a halt.
Yeah, but
Whereas
there's always a consequence, no? I mean, they have an exchange, and there is always something else that happens because of that exchange. There is always a consequence. So I think that's what makes the story going. That what happens in one, what they say in one scene, then you see the next scene, and it has a lot to do with what you just heard or saw. So it's the way the film is built. It's like this is this film. I mean, it's not another movie. It's this movie. So it's the way I make movies. I mean, it's not. There is no mystery. It's like you just saw the film. It's like.
Okay, more questions? Yes. Yeah, you.
Why so many years between films?
I made between Los Guantes Mágicos and this film, I made 2 other movies, and I wrote 2 or 3 books. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know about the books. Can you tell us about the books?
Yeah, I write short stories. So I guess I published, two books, Literatura y otros cuentos, and then Tres Cuentos. So Tres Cuentos is a short story book. It's 3 short stories that are very long. They are more than 100 pages each. And Literatura y otros cuentos is a book of short. It's like 6 short stories. And I started writing short stories a long time ago. Rapado, my first book, is based on one of the short stories of my book Rapado. And then I wrote Velcro y Show, which is my second short story book. And then Literatura y otros cuentos and Tres Cuentos. So yeah, I have two separate careers. Actually, my career is filmmaking, and because it's harder to make a movie, so I just focus more on making movies. But I write as well. And
are there any of the ingredients in the short stories? Do they find their way into this film or into your other films?
I think there is a lot in common. And it's this kind of the same world. And in my last book, the stories are also digressive as the stories in this film is. I change the focus from one character to the other very easily. So yeah, I mean, if you remember my previous films, they were more concise. They were more only one story, not only one storyline, but you were following one character, and here you follow many characters. So I think that's also something that is reflected in the literature.
What, can you account for the shift from the kind of more single character focus to this kind of multitude of characters?
I think I wanted to make something less pure. You know, I wanted to less pure, less something more like a hybrid somehow. I didn't want to
a hybrid.
Hybrid.
You mean,
yeah. I'm sorry. It's like you make these stories that are kind of more concrete, concise, and then at one point you want to get away from that. I don't know, you want to change. Also, my previous films were following generations, like Rapado was following people from 18 years old, more or less. Silvia Prieto is people in their late 20s. Los Guantes Mágicos is people in their late 30s. And so I wanted to break that pattern and just mix all these generations together. And the result of that is like a more complex story with more digressions, different paths, different storylines.
Yes.
Hi. So watching the film, I feel like a lot of the characters are going through different struggles, and each of them had their unique struggle that we kind of got to see into. And so I'm wondering, from a writer's perspective, what was the most challenging arc to kind of capture, and how did you get beyond that kind of to cut that?
Yeah, the thing is, it doesn't work in that way in the film. There are no arcs, actually. It's kind of a different way of telling the story. I mean, there is not a climax. I never think of a first act, second act, third act. I just read once, only once I read a screenplay tutorial or whatever you call it, and it's like I'm not really interested in that way of telling films. And in telling stories. I'm not.
The challenges that each character faces, kind of, how did you capture them as a writer? What was the most challenging character for you to capture on an individual level? Ignore that said arc.
Yeah, but it's like. There wasn't a challenge there. The challenge was putting the story together, actually. I mean, building up the characters was not a challenge. The challenge was making sense out of all this, all this bunch of characters, but not a single one. I mean, it wasn't a problem. I never had problems with one single character, but just putting them all together and see what happens and trying to find a storyline there. But for me, it's easy to build up a scene and to build up a character and to put them, to make them interact. But then I have to see how all these pieces connect, and that's the real challenge.
To kind of follow on from what you just said, when you're kind of accumulating these characters and these incidents, presumably in the end you're left with a great deal of material or detail or incident that doesn't fit into the final kind of whole that you create. Is there not for you a temptation to just keep letting the thing get bigger and bigger and more sort of longer, I guess?
Yeah, that's also why it takes me a long time to write a script, because I have to start, as you said, cutting things out, editing, leaving things out. Yeah, you're completely right. I mean, it's you have to find the final form, and in the process, you can get lost, and you can, yeah, this script was much longer. When I had it ready for production, it was much longer, and I decided to leave, several scenes out, and then I did also I cut some scenes out also in the editing. So, and that's kind of new for me, because before I never left anything out. I just had my films exactly the same as the script.
Were there entire kind of characters that disappeared?
No. Well, maybe yes.
Maybe yes.
Maybe yes. But yeah, like a very, like one character who had 2 or 3 scenes. Yeah.
Yes.
If you improvise with them at all, and if they understand the tone of it from the beginning, or how you relay that to them,
Can
they
you
get it
repeat
from
the
the
question?
page.
I missed
start
the beginning.
again with the
I'm sorry.
mic.
More to do with actors and working with actors, and whether they understand the tone from the get-go, just from the page, or if you have to meet with them individually in advance.
Yeah, I rehearse a lot with the actors. Some of them get the tone right away. The ones who know me get the tone right away. The others, sometimes it takes a while, and I really rehearse a lot. We rehearse and rehearse and rehearse until we get more or less together what, sorry? How many weeks? Maybe months. Yeah, but not every day, of course, but yeah. Yeah, we do rehearse a lot.
The whole short story background.
Can you get the mic?
I appreciate the short story background, the whole Raymond
okay.
Carver and
All
all of that. Like you feel shortcuts and Altman and
Uh-huh.
yeah.
Thank you.
Are any of those short stories been translated into English?
A couple only, but they haven't. Yeah, a couple. One is in one anthology, I think, and but not.
Following on from this audience member's question, would it be true to say that the actors that were going to work with you in the future, they could watch this film and they would immediately know what you wanted in terms of tone?
But the actors know me already, but still, it's we have to work a lot on getting the music of the scenes somehow. We still have to work a lot. Some of them who I worked with, some of them, like for example, the guy who plays Arturo, I worked with him in 2 movies before this one, and he understands right away what I want. I mean, actually, he is like that. Somehow he acts like that. So
He is Arturo.
Yeah, no, I don't think he is Arturo, but he reads he reads his lines, and I don't have to tell him. I mean, he's doing exactly what I want, but it's not the same case with many of the other actors. We have to really find the right tone.
Is it a case of kind of subtracting from what they're doing, or is it, or there are other cases where you're trying to add and build what they're doing?
Well, sometimes I feel, sometimes it's more like subtracting. Sometimes I feel that many actors want to do more because they feel that they have to add more things to a character when it's enough who they are and the lines that they are saying and the situation they are in. And for me, that's enough. But sometimes I have the feeling that an actor may think that he or she is not doing his or her job if they don't add the psychology or another level or
Backstory of the character.
backstory and this and that. And I don't need it, and that's part of the conversation. And
So less is more often.
yeah, I think so. Yeah.
We have time for the final few questions. Is there anyone else? Come on. Wait for the mic.
I can speak loud. I love the way you block scenes, and I'm curious, do you let the actors do a lot of improv for their staging in the scenes, or are you very specific? Do you really like to control the blocking? Like when they were at the beach scene, all that blocking when they came in and they were smoking and they took over the space and.
It's a good question. We rehearse a lot the dialogues. And when we rehearse the dialogues, in those scenes with many characters, yes, we also rehearse many of the actions that are there came up. And but basically, it's mostly the dialogues. And I think the actors have a lot of freedom with what they do with the actions, but less with their lines in my films. So there's no so much improvisation in dialogue, but more in actions.
Well, I'll ask the last question. In arriving at this kind of way of working, in arriving at this kind of way of telling a story, do you feel that there were any filmmakers or maybe artists in other forms that represented a kind of an inspiration or a kind of a compass for that kind of approach?
Yeah, I always mention American classics like Howard Hawks and Preston Sturges. For me, are like very important directors, and as well as some French directors like Robert Bresson and Ozu, and there is a wide variety of directors that I admire, and like Renoir as well. For me, is very important, although he does exactly the opposite as I do.
Right. What I meant was, are there filmmakers who represent a model for the kind of approach that you've
not really
arrived at?
Not a model.
I would agree, and I can't think of any others.
Yeah, not a model. No, I rather I had to find a way of telling my stories in my own way. So.
Okay, Martín Rejtman, thank you very much.
Thank you.